Søren Kierkegaard is the 19th century Danish philosopher considered to be one of the founding fathers of existentialism. He was born May 5, 1813 in Copenhagen, Denmark, into a very wealthy and prominent Danish merchant family that was very religious. His parents were Michael Pedersen Kierkegaard and Anne Sørendatter Lund. He was the youngest of 7 children and was bullied throughout school as a child. He studied theology and philosophy at the University of Copenhagen from 1830 to 1840. His fiancée was Regine Olsen, and by the end of his life, he published about 40 pieces of work. 4 of his most famous pieces include Either or, Fear and Trembling, The Sickness unto Death, and Concepts of Anxiety. He died in 1855 from a painful spinal disease. He was influenced by Socrates, Plato, J.G. Hamming, G.E. Lessing, his teacher from the University of Copenhagen, Paul Martin Moller, Goethe, the German philosopher G.W.F. Hegel. Much of Kierkegaard's work was actually devoted to critiquing Hegel, and in particular his dialectical system, which claimed reason could contain all of reality. For Kierkegaard, this reduced many religious truths to philosophy, and so much of his critique was an attempt to show how certain experience, especially relating to religious faith, escaped rational understanding, which is where he suggested to take a leap of faith. His relationship with Regine Olsen greatly influenced him. He often attacked the modern pillars of life, especially marriage. He believed in love, for he actually was engaged to her for over a year, but he thought that romance and marriage didn't mix, and that there could not be passion and sex while at the same time having children and routine, which is one of the reasons he broke off his engagement. His family was very religious because of his guilt-ridden father for having impregnated Kierkegaard's mother out of wedlock and cursing while he was a shepherd in the freezing hills of Denmark. The father's sense of guilt was so extreme because he thought God would punish him by taking the lives of all 7 of his children before reaching the age of 34, which is the age Jesus Christ was crucified. The father's fears actually ended up ringing true because all of the kids did die before 34 except Søren and his older brother Pete. This brings me to death. Death was constantly around him. By the time he was 22, all of his siblings had died. Having death be around him for so long and so much, it came to become a major theme in all of his works. Being bullied for so long, he learned to laugh in the face of the bullies rather than crying. His topic of laughing at life is present in his book Either or. An example in his writing is when he writes, "I saw that the meaning of life was to make a living, its goal to become a concealer, that the rich delight of love was to acquire a well-to-do girl, that the blessedness of friendship was to help each other in financial difficulties, that wisdom was whatever the majority assumed it to be, that enthusiasm was to give a speech, that courage was to risk being fined $10, that the cordiality was to say, 'May it do you good' after a meal, that piété was to go to communion once a year. This I saw and I laughed." Existentialism is a philosophical movement centering on the analysis of the universe being unfathomable, and the plight of the individual must assume ultimate responsibility for the acts of free will without any certain knowledge of what is right or wrong, good or bad. His view was that the truth is found through subjectivity, through our individual and unique apprehension of things. Existentialism is often confused with nihilism because both deal with that life is meaningless. In existentialism, it's different because you exist in a meaningless life, but you and your actions and your plight through life is what gives it meaning. He kept several journals, which are still intact and continue to be read and studied by students and professors of philosophy. His influence was first largely in Scandinavian, German-speaking Europe, where his work had an impact on Protestant theology. In The Concept of Anxiety, which he published in 1844, he introduced the word angst, which is still used today. It's used for understanding how many choices we have and how we have the smallest understanding on how to even make these life choices. In this book, he writes, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forward." Constant angst still is brought into conversation today. He relates to constant angst in his book by saying that anyone who has given the matter any serious thought will know that I'm right when I say it's not possible for anyone to absolutely, in every conceivable way, be completely content, not even for a single half hour of his life. No one has come into the world without crying. No one asks when you want to come into the world. No one asks when you want to leave. How empty and meaningless life is. We bury a person, throw 3 shovels of earth over him, drive out in a coach, drive back in a coach, and console ourselves that we still have life enough to live. He didn't try to rationalize or justify why he viewed Christianity as the answer, which is where he introduced the idea of taking a leap of faith, which is still used for reasoning today. Existential psychologists believe that it's not only important to identify and reduce the symptoms of mental illness and other psychological issues, but to go beyond these symptoms and addressing how a person defines meaning, purpose, and life well lived. Toy Story 3, in the final scenes, existentialism is present, and when the toys find themselves sliding their way to extinction, while they're facing it head-on with full appreciation of how great their battle was and how great their loss is. These fitness posters also touch on existentialism and how they're saying that life goes on no matter how you eat, how you work out. You can stay the same or float on by without any change. You give your life its own purpose.